in the near future. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and proceed with our first kind of overview of the cost study. If you're having any difficulty with the audio or visual, just send me a quick chat message and I'll try to see if I can't do something to mitigate the problem. So the first question that I'd like to address is, what is the Delaware Cost Study? Well, it's a national study that has been in place for about 25 years. We have about 200 participating institutions each year. Since 1992, more than 700 institutions have provided data to help the Delaware Cost Study become an important benchmarking tool for both individual academic departments, colleges, and in some cases, state systems of higher education. Among those systems that we work with include the ones that are listed here: University of Alaska, University of North Carolina system, some of the specialized groups that provide data within their membership, the AAU Data Exchange and the Southern Universities Group. We've had the University of Maine join us recently. In the past, the PASHE system, the Missouri system, Nebraska, Connecticut, and the City University of New York have all contributed and participated in the study. So the question might be, well, what's the short version of what the cost study provides? And the basic answer we like to give is, it helps to answer the question, who is teaching what to whom and at what cost? A little bit more of a nuance on that is that we focus at the academic discipline level, so we provide comparative analysis of not only teaching loads and the costs of instruction, but the amount of separately budgeted either research or public service activity that a department has engaged in a year. Here's a little checklist of the data that you will need to answer the question of who is teaching what to whom and at what cost. This checklist is available on our web page if it's difficult to read or to kind of follow all of the dimensions. But essentially, we need to gather the number of degrees awarded over a 3-year period, and that provides a basis for the national norm grouping that a department would be included in. In the who is teaching what area, we differentiate between instructional faculty rank, and that's to essentially 4 levels: tenure track, other permanent, non-tenured faculty, supplemental faculty, and teaching assistants. So we need that sort of HR data. The area that includes what is being taught and to whom includes the detailed level information about courses that were taught in the fall semester of the study year. So for this current year, that would be the fall of 2018, and it would include instructor category in terms of what faculty rank they are. Did they teach the entire class, or did they teach it with a team? And most importantly, what they were paid, because we use what's referred to as the origin of instructor method for organizing the data in the cost study. And it basically says that we want to follow the money and use what a instructor was paid to teach to map that to the courses that they taught, and that would then compose an academic unit or department. Now, in some cases, there's a difference between the title of the professor's home department and the course that they teach. So, for example, if a teacher who's in the political science department taught a course for history, but was paid by the political science department, the student credit hours and class sections that would be associated with that instruction would go to the home department of political science. So we can talk more about that as it influences data submission, but we're going to move on a little bit to what does the data submission process kind of look like. And this is just a snapshot from one of our pages on our website that shows 3 views of what the web portal looks like, what a fixed column Excel file would look like if you're going to do a file upload, and how that maps to the various elements of the data, so that you can kind of see how on a row by row level the data is sort of connected or related to each element. I know this would be very difficult to read, but it's really just there to emphasize that we expect most of our participants to develop a file of the data that's going to be submitted and then upload it to the web portal. In order to do that, you have to have some idea of how much time it's going to take you for the cost study as a project. And so this is a chart that shows the results of a survey that we conducted of about 100 of our cost study participants in the last year. And the average time that it took an IR analyst to gather and validate the data was about 58 person hours. If you add on the effort that was required by business intelligence analysts and other administrative assistants, or perhaps students, employees, the total is about 85 hours. So a little more than 2 full weeks of work to get the data together and to validate it. And that would include some degree of correspondence with our staff where we have questions. We've tried to make the process of looking at the data and validate it as efficient as possible and also as useful as possible to our participants. And so we'll focus on that for the next few minutes. You can see that in this chart that we're finding that many of our participants have a data warehouse and somebody, a database administrator or a business intelligence analyst that queries that database. And you can see the amount of time involved there is roughly 15 person hours. So maybe a couple of days work to get that data together. Our timeline for planning for data submission is, right now we're in the sort of opening part of the study. We're trying to help people understand what's involved in the study and make plans on how much time it's going to take them and when they're going to get their data in. We have a number of discounts to try to encourage early commitment, so we have an idea of what the peers will look like for the coming study year, and also to have an idea of how many submissions we'll be managing. That early discount period ends on October 15th, but there is also a 2-year discount available if you're interested in committing to 2 years of the study. There's a 25% discount that actually extends beyond that October 15th period. With that in mind, if it takes several weeks to gather and validate the data, we hope that our participants will begin this task prior to Thanksgiving so that they can meet the target date of the end of January for data submission. We call it a target date because we know that you're very hardworking people with lots of ad hoc requests and unexpected demands made on your time. And sometimes just getting the data for the cost study involves some discovery that involves going into areas that you might not have expected. Often that's the last kind of 10% of the data validation phase of things, where you're trying to determine if the data that we are asking for is aligned with that which you're being able to provide. So I've sort of listed February here as the target date for institutions that need extensions or need to make corrections or adjustments in their data. In reality, we know that'll extend beyond February of 2020, but our target goal is to try to have a robust set of preliminary norms available either early May or no later than the 21st of May. And then we'll have the remaining entries that are still in process completed by the first week of July, and release the norms and have peer analysis results available July 9th. We can work with you in some circumstances if you need data, more basically sooner or more immediately before the study's completed. However, most of the time, with this timeline established, we would advise to try to be patient and integrate the availability of results into your planning. We do have non-participant access available if you need immediate results and you haven't provided data in the past. You could contact me about that option if that would be of value to you. We take a look at the progress of the data submissions through a dashboard that kind of looks like this. You'll see that it's kind of color-coded. The institutions that are displayed in white are those in which data has been submitted and there's no errors that have been detected. If the data has been approved and submitted to the cost study, you'll see it coded in green. If it's still in process and there are some questions where we have to follow up due to concerns about errors, you'll see that coded in pink. And if you're an institution that participated in the past but is not currently signed up for the study, you'll see that coded in gray. So we try to keep track of progress, and we're going to send out kind of status reports about where we think institutions should be in the process as the year progresses. So hopefully that will make it easier for our participants to judge their progress and manage any contingencies that could come about. Now we're going to use our University of Example from 2017 for a lot of the demonstration purposes of this presentation. And it's a relatively small sample of instructional programs, and it is not really going to apply to every case that would be of interest to our audience today. So please feel free, if you have examples about or questions about your particular institution, to let me know through email, or we can arrange either a phone call or a video discussion. The University of Example has about a dozen programs. This is what the homepage for the University of Example would look like. You'll see it has a listing of its individual academic departments, the users that are in the web portal. That would include an institutional administrator, and you are able to provide what we refer to as view-only access to individuals in your institution. View-only means they are not able to edit the data, but they can look at it. They can look at some of the benchmarks that are available and make comments. This can be useful in the data validation phase of the process. We send our UD data to our 50 department chairs and college budget officers for each of the 7 colleges here, and ask them to take a look at it and make sure that it comports with what their understanding of their productivity and costs, their faculty composition, the degrees that are awarded, and so on. So also in this homepage, you'll see there are tabs to access the national norms, to request peer analyses, and to look at a number of reports, which we'll be taking a look at.
Hiya, Carla.
Not sure what that was. Let's move on. Here is a example of a music department at the University of Example that awards degrees at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral levels. You'll also see here that we ask you to select your academic calendar from either semester or quarter. We also have on this page the choice of selecting that a program does not grant academic degrees. These 3-year averages are, in this example, for the study year 2017. They'll be updated to the next set of 3-year periods directly before 2018 for this current year. You also see that there is a listing of the other academic programs in the University of Example. In addition to music, you can go to each of these pages by just clicking on one of those if you're interested in navigating to a different program. The 3-year averages are most important in determining the highest degree that's awarded by an academic department. That is one of the types of national norms. The counts also provide a proportion of undergraduate compared to total degrees that are awarded, and that's one of our norm types in addition to the Carnegie norm types. You'll also see on this page a link to the data definitions on our cost study homepage. And that may be useful if you're looking at something and you're not sure exactly what the data definition is. You can get directly to that page and get a detailed description of what the data definition is for each data item. Now continuing down the academic department page for music, this is what we refer to as Part 2. The data entry includes the teaching activity for instructors that taught in the fall semester, differentiated by faculty rank. And you'll notice that in the left-hand column under FTE faculty total for full-time equivalents, we had 29 regular tenure eligible faculty, and we had someone was being paid to do grant work activity in the fall semester for 0.2 of their FTE workload. That is subtracted out of the faculty available for instruction and yields a net of 28.8 tenured faculty. You'll see that of the 3 permanent other regular faculty that are non-tenured, 2 were engaged in some research or public service activity that was sponsored by an external grant and therefore were not available for instruction. So we go from 3 regular faculty down to 1 for the fall semester. You'll then see down below the teaching activity by the faculty in various degree levels. So we have undergraduate lower division, we have undergraduate upper division. So that's lower division is freshman and sophomore, upper division junior, senior. And then if there's individualized instruction that's provided, that's categorized separately. Part of the reason for that is individualized instruction does not get counts of class sections. We also have the teaching that was provided to graduate students, both in lecture sections and as individualized instruction. And here you see there's quite a few credit hours in the grad individualized instruction for the tenured faculty. So that's the differentiation of student credit hour types that's required. We also ask that the subset of credit hours that were taught to undergraduates and graduates in an online fashion are listed. So this is a subset of what's recorded here in the student credit hour counts. And by online, basically we're talking about instruction that's provided without a physical meeting place, other than possibly one organizing meeting at the beginning of the semester and possibly situations where students go to a testing center but don't meet in physical location otherwise. So essentially 100% online instruction not requiring a class meeting space. That's our definition. I know there are many other definitions that may be in practice, but we're just trying to be as straightforward as we can about online instruction. The corresponding count of class sections by, again, faculty rank and class section type differentiated into lecture and lab sections. So for instance, if a lab discussion or recitation section was held, that would be counted in the leftmost column. A typical regular organized lecture section is in the other cells under undergraduate lower division, undergraduate upper division, or graduate level lecture sections. Also, if the individualized instruction student credit hours that were devoted to doctoral dissertation are available, that would be entered in this area. Part 3 of the data that's required for the study is the cost data for the academic and fiscal year. We also asked for a total number of student credit hours differentiated by undergraduate and graduate level, and the subset that were taught online to be included in this section. And then an aggregate number of the amount of the salaries, benefits, and then any other than personnel expenditures, which would include materials that are needed for providing instruction and a variety of expenses that are used to support instructional activity in a direct fashion. We then asked you to report the aggregate amount of externally sponsored research and public service expenditure that was made by the faculty in the department. It's just an aggregate number, and it's generally speaking going to be funds that were provided by external grants from sources outside the institution. The only exception to that would be if there was a matching amount of money that was provided in order to meet a requirement of a grant that might be included in this separately budgeted expense category for research or public service. You'll notice that you can edit your data and save it, but one of the things that we really encourage you to consider doing is to review the data for submission by clicking this radio button. And what that will do is take you to a set of 3-year averages on the next page that are related to this department. So you'll see at the very top of the page, now we've switched departments here for the example. Now we're in computer science, but you have an option to compare your productivity and cost tables in Table 3 and Table 4 with a 3-year average based by Carnegie classification, the highest degree awarded by the department, or by the proportion of undergraduate degrees to total degrees in increments of 25%. We'll look at that a little bit more in detail in a minute. You'll notice that you can also select to look at comparisons based on either publicly or privately governed departments, or you can combine both types. So here's a summary of what's included in these 3-year average metrics. The Table 3 metrics are going to provide a comparison by faculty type using the 4-digit CIP level match. And we've also used a refined means approach to identify and remove outliers. So it's a fairly smooth 3-year average of similar departments. You'll also be able to, as I said, select which of the Carnegie highest degree or proportion of degrees benchmarks that we provide. If you're interested in using these 3-year averages, there's also a choice to use this in your institutional report in tables 3 and 4. But in the institutional report, you only have a choice of the Carnegie class comparators. We're still working on developing the other options to provide that in the institutional report. So here's a choice where we're going to select Carnegie and highest research activity in this example. We're selected just to use the public submissions from the R1 institutions. And in table 3, this is what the results would look like. You'll see your student credit hours by faculty type arranged, and in the columns that are highlighted in yellow, you'll see a comparison with the 3-year average that's displayed in red. So for instance, there were 11 tenured faculty for this computer science program. They were teaching approximately 277 student credit hours combined at the undergraduate level. The 3-year average was about 96, so roughly 3 times the number of credit hours at the undergrad level were being taught by this example. At the graduate level, they were teaching less, about 24 credit hours per person versus about 62. In terms of class sections, the tenured faculty were teaching a little over 4 compared to 1.9 for the 3-year average. And then you can continue to see these comparisons. The regular permanent faculty were teaching less than the 3-year average in undergraduate and graduate level instruction, but not when you combine the 2 types together. They were, well, they were slightly more than the 2. That's because I'm not sure why, but I'm not going to try to figure it out right now. They were teaching 5 sections versus 4.42. And you can then go down to the bottom and see that as a department as a whole, if you do compared all faculty types, that bottom yellow line, they were teaching 282 credit hours compared to 192 at the undergraduate level, 14.9 versus 37 at the grad level, and about 4 sections versus about 2.6. So this is a productive faculty relative to the averages. And you'll see that the cost per student credit hour displayed on line 5 is only $150 compared to an average of $313. You can also see that this was, the comparison with R1 institutions, and the sample size was 51 R1 institutions over the 3-year period. So sharing this information with the department chair could be useful. Sharing it with the dean or provost could also be useful. And that's one of the options you have if you elect to use the view only option in the web portal. Under reports, again on your homepage, you see a link where it says, first you see view institution report, you see view 3-year average report. That's really the 3-year institution report. And it would look kind of like this. This is just table 3A, where you'll see all of the academic departments that were entered into the study for this university example. And you'll see the degrees that were awarded, the percent of degrees that were at the undergrad level, how many instructional faculty there were that were tenured, because this is table 3A. And again, this comparison of the student credit hours, undergraduate compared to the 3-year average, graduate compared to the 3-year average, combined total, and the class sections that were taught by the faculty at each level. So we think that this would provide you with a good overview of how your departments compare if you're trying to, A, provide this kind of a snapshot for a dean or a provost, or maybe more importantly for the immediate topic, when you're looking at your data to see if it seems reasonable prior to submitting it to the cost study, or while we're in that validation phase, you can use this as a tool to do that. This will be available once you've determined that you think your data is ready to submit to the study. Now, as I said, you can also kind of look at a comparison of your cost per student credit hour if you've submitted to the study over more than 1 year. You can do a comparison over the years. So this compare direct expenditure by program link that's again under reports will give you a chart that looks like this, and it shows you the cost per student credit hour across the CIPs that have been reported to the study. As I said, if you were in the study for more than 1 year, you can update the chart. And in this case, I'd say, I'm wondering why in 2016 math was so much more expensive than it was in 2017. That's the bars are highlighted. The blue is 2016 and the gold is 2017. Or why accounting, or music, that is, I'm sorry, music was so much more expensive in 2017 than it was in 2016. And you can also move down the page here and deselect any of the departments that might be outliers, which could affect the scaling of this chart. So it helps to identify anomalies in the data and also give you, again, an overall snapshot of how 1 year compares with the next. So we think this is a useful tool for both data validation and, to some extent, for reporting at a level to senior administration once you're sure that all the data is correct. This is a view of how you can add view-only users in the Users tab. You have one person who is the institutional administrator for the cost study, and then you can add selectively additional users to see either individual departments or groups of departments for their review and use. These are kind of the steps that you would follow if you wanted to add a view-only user in the web portal. We don't think that this has been used widely at this point in its evolution. I think that's at least partially because it's taken us a while to develop the capacity of it and to try to promote it among our participants. So we hope that you'll find this is a valuable addition to what you can do in the study. Again, here's a sort of step-by-step a listing of what you would do. And as I said, I'll provide a PDF of this PowerPoint if you're interested in having these details. Now, I'd like to spend some time talking about the national norms and the institutional ratio options that are available as results in the study, because we think that sometimes a lot of effort goes into providing data to the study, and the options that you have available to you to use the data for reporting may not have as much awareness among our participants. And that's primarily because in order to be in the study, you have to put the data in, but there's no requirement to use the data in any particular way once you've completed your participation for data entry and validation. So there's 3 types of national norms. The Carnegie norms are based on your institution's Carnegie classification, and they may cover a majority of the departments in your institution, but there may be a subset that do not match up well. For instance, at the University of Delaware, we have anthropology and philosophy as departments. They do not offer doctoral degrees here at Delaware, and so they would not match very well with our Carnegie doctoral classification. So a better choice might be to use the highest degree that's awarded by the department as a comparator group in the national norm, and we recommend that sometimes is the choice that would be used either to augment a Carnegie comparison or in place of one. And then the third norm type is the proportion of undergraduate degrees compared to total degrees, and we differentiate based on increments of 25%. So 0 to 25% undergraduate degrees would be essentially graduate-oriented programs. And then we have a 25 to 50% group, a 50 to 75% group, and a 75 to 100% undergraduate. And so you might have a department that does offer, say, a master's degree, but maybe only a relatively few when compared to the overall degree production for the department. So maybe that 75 to 100% group would be the best match in that case for doing benchmarking. Now, I'll give a brief description of the four tables so that if you're not familiar to the study, you'd be able to get an idea of what the contents of the national norm tables look like. The table 1 provides the percent of each course level taught, and it's differentiated by faculty rank. And table 1A gives tenure track faculty. Table 1B provides non-tenured permanent faculty, their percent of teaching. C is supplemental faculty. 1D is for teaching assistants that are instructor of record, and 1E is for teaching assistants that are not the teacher of record, but are providing support to a class. And in some cases, they may be the associated with a count of sections where it might be a 0 credit class, and they're meeting with students in a course section, but it's a 0 credit course. Table 2 is also based on percentages, but it's really the percent of workload by faculty type differentiated into table A for tenure. So it displays the percentage of teaching at each course level, and table 2B is for non-tenured permanent faculty. And we'll see an example of table 1A in a minute. Table 3 is probably the one that gets a lot of attention. It differentiates faculty rank again, but it shows the number of credit hours taught by faculty rank for each person in that level. It's what we were looking at previously when we were looking at the 3-year average comparison benchmark. And table 4 has 2 levels. Most of the time you'll be looking at 4A, which shows cost per student credit hour, cost per FTE student, the percent of the direct instructional expense that's accounted for by personnel expenditure, and the amount of externally sponsored research and public service per tenured faculty. Table 4B has quartile values for some of those same ratios, and I neglected to mention table 3G also has quartile values. Now, in displaying the norms, we've actually distributed the norms in these 4 tables for many years, and table 3G and table 4B, the quartile values, we're still working on getting those implemented in the web portal. We expect to have those available quite soon, if you were interested in those and you were unaware of them, we would send you the Excel versions that we've developed, and they're available for immediate use. But they will be in the web portal in the very near future. Under norms, you'll see that your homepage has a tab for norms. So you would then go to that table, that tab. And there are drop-down menus for the 3 types of national norms and the associated institutional ratio tables. So in the Carnegie norms, you'll see there's an option for research institutions. That would be R1 and R2, or the doctoral universities that are classified in the research index as high and highest research activity. This is based on the 2018 Carnegie classification that was released in February. So we're moving on to that new classification scheme. The CIP codes can be selected at the 2, 4, or 6-digit level. So the example you see here has got communication at the 09 level, at the 09.01 level, and at the 09.0101 level. And you can see there's slightly different descriptions provided by NCES for each of those levels of specificity. You can also select any of the tables, or if you use the control function, you can select all of the tables relevant to a particular CIP with one viewing. The highest degree options also have 4 levels: doctoral, professional, master's, bachelor's, or non-degree granting programs. Again, the same tables are available, and the same options of 2, 4, or 6-digit level CIP to choose from. If you pick at the 6-digit level, you will, in a given subject area, you'll get the most granular data, but also it may be more sparse than if you were to choose at the 4-digit level or certainly at the 2-digit level. Most of our norms are based on using the 4-digit level, and that's both in order to ensure coverage and also to have a consistent set of norms over the years. The 6-digit level can be useful, and sometimes it's available and does a better job at differentiating between program types. The norm based on the proportion of undergraduate degrees awarded also has the 4 levels that we mentioned, and it looks like in my picture I've made a mistake here and didn't pick the right picture to display. So it should be 0 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, and 75 to 100% undergraduate degrees. That's a little bit more illustrated in the picture on the right, where it says select norm ratio tables. Now, the difference between the norms and the ratio tables is that the ratio tables will show you row level information about what contributed to a norm. So I'll move on to an example here. This is a norm set for the group of 50 to 75% in the CIP 13.01 Education General. The percent, this is table 1A, so this is the norm that would go for, teaching by tenured faculty. So the percent of lower division on average was about 45.4%, upper division 47.4%, total undergraduate 42%, graduate by tenured faculty was 66.9%. The lab discussion and recitation sections taught by tenured faculty was about 50.6%, lower division lecture 41.7%, and et cetera. So you can see that there's a lot of detailed information in each table The sample size is also displayed here. There were 16 in this particular example that were programs that awarded between 50 and 75% undergraduate degrees and had tenured faculty teaching students at that in that department. Here's the ratio table, or a subset of the ratio table. You can see that we've scrolled down towards the bottom of the table. There's the sample size of 16. You'll see that in some cases there's little asterisks that are next to some of the numbers. Those indicate outliers, and the number of outliers is included in the summary down at the bottom. And we use that to compute a refined mean. So we take the raw average, compute the standard deviation, identify values that are either 2 standard deviations above or 2 standard deviations below the raw average, exclude them, and then recompute an average for a refined mean. And that has an effect of muting the effect of any extreme values that might be in the data set. Now here you can see that there's a lot more granular information. If you're interested in looking at that level of detail, you can see which departments awarded bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. Some only awarded the first 2 types. You can see the total size of the department, so you could sort this and select only departments that were of a similar size to the one that is at your institution. So it provides you with the ability to do a lot more than just use the norms as they're computed if you want to try to tailor a comparison to a specific departmental reality more so than the norm would provide. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about before I might try to answer a few of the questions that have come in is the peer analysis option. You can request peer analyses in the web portal. The requirement is that you have to include at least 10 institutions who participated in a specific year. There's an unlimited number of peer requests that you may make in the web portal. The only limit is if we have determined that a combination of peer requests would have the effect of making it possible to identify an individual institution by row level, we will not grant that request. And what will happen in that circumstances is it will likely contact the person that requested it and see if we can't work out an alternative that would suit their needs. But we have our terms of use, and confidentiality and the security of data is of paramount importance to the study's integrity and to the proper use of the results. And so we won't let the peer analysis tool compromise that important principle. We will also provide up to 5 Excel formatted peer requests. If you send us a list of 10 or more institutions, we'll provide results, and I'll show you an example of what they look like. This is an example of where you would go into the peer analysis request tab, and you would select either you can input an institution name, and for example, if you were interested in choosing all the SUNY schools, if you typed in SUNY, it would give you all the SUNY schools, and then you can click on a little box to include them in your request. We ask that you give the peer request a name so that we can keep track of the requests that have been made. And then once you've selected at least 10, you submit it for approval. We'll normally try to process that as soon as it arrives to us, but we ask that you give us a couple of days grace period just in case something is going on that makes it difficult to meet that timeline. So for example, here's the SUNY options that came up just by typing in institution name. And you might not be interested in all four of these, but you have the checkbox to select the ones you are interested in, add to your selected group. Once you get your group selected, you'll see it listed. Another way of going about doing this is to use a CIP code, and then when you select one and click Find Matches, it'll find all the institutions that submitted that CIP in the study year, and you can then, again, go down and pick the ones that you think make the best fit for your peer group. So here's what a peer group looks like when it's completed. You can also see that there's a little trash can there if you decide, well, wait a minute, we picked somebody that we didn't want to pick. You can delete that one institution from your choice before you submit it. Once you've got the peer request approved, you'll get results that look like this. It'll allow you to pick a CIP and the individual tables that you're interested in, and then you will get a printout of the data. I shouldn't say a printout, I should say a display of the data for that CIP and those tables that you selected. It'll look kind of like this, where each row will be one of the institutions that was in your peer group selection. The identity of the institution is masked, but you can see who was in your peer group by the display at the top of the web view. There's an option to then copy the data so that you can put it in Excel or some other type of worksheet and work with the data outside of the portal. Here's another view of what the ratios that are included in this particular example. It's table 4 for a peer group in business administration, or maybe that's accounting. Here's what the set of tables looks like if you request the Excel formatted version of things. There are 4 tables that are formatted, and then there are ratio files and a list of your peers. Here's an example of what the table 4 looks like in the Excel formatted version of the peer request. It will list the CIP, it will list the name of the discipline, the sample size. So if you selected 20 institutions, or in this case it must be at least 20, or at least 30 because, I'm sorry, at least 33 because English there are 32 listed as the sample size, but in comparison Ag and Business Management only had 6. So it's going to depend on what was submitted by those peer institutions as to what sample size you're going to obtain. The advantage here is that you don't have to do all the copying and pasting. The table's already formatted for you, and you'll get a table for 1, 2, 3, and 4 formatted, and then you'll also get the ratio files that support the data underlying those summaries. So that is everything that I think I have prepared to talk about. And maybe I'll take a couple of minutes just to kind of answer a couple of questions that came up in the chat. We've only got about 5 minutes left. So before we get too far along, I'll just encourage you that if there's a topic I didn't cover or something that didn't make sense to you, just let me know, and I'll either answer you individually, or it might be the topic of an additional webinar in the future. So one question was that if an institution has more than one department that shares the same CIP, are they merged together or can they remain separate? They can remain separate when you're reporting them into the study. And this is important because you might want to differentiate them as much as possible at the 6-digit level, but it still might be nearly impossible to choose a different 6-digit level CIP. So you can submit them separately, but when we're aggregating for peer analyses and for norms, they would be put together. So your institutional report would have them as separate, but the norms and peer results would have them aggregated at the same 4-digit level. Another question is not being able to identify individualized instruction. That's a difficult question to answer without knowing more about the circumstances of your registrar's information and your databases. But I would say in general, they're going to be, they tend to be low enrollment classes, or I shouldn't even really say classes because they might be listed as a class, but they might only have 3 or 6 credit hours. So sometimes the way to determine those is by course catalog number. For instance, I know here at Delaware, the dissertation and research hours tend to get a course number that corresponds to either master's or doctoral level research, and in some cases undergraduate research. But I'm not sure I can answer that in more detail without knowing a little bit more information. So we would encourage everybody to report at the 6-digit level, and differentiating programs is another challenge. You might have an example in our case is our sociology department. It's a department that includes both criminal justice and sociology, and criminal justice has its own CIP. So if it were possible to differentiate the credit hours and the instructional expenses and the faculty, the degrees awarded, I would say it's probably a good idea to separate sociology and criminal justice. But in our case, they share the same budget and some of the same faculty. The degrees are awarded as sociology. So they would be combined into one department. And so it's going to match your institutional realities as to whether you have to do what we've done in this case and put them together, or if you can separate them. In table 4 in the portal, we have not duplicated the CIP 999 total institution, but if you'd like that information, we will provide that to you as an Excel file outside of the portal. I have some mixed feelings about whether it's a good idea to include CIP 9999, which combines all of the programs into one, because it's not a real program. But we do have it available in the classic Excel form, and we'll be glad to give that to you if it's of use. And I'm also be very interested in hearing other feedback on that issue. We've reached 3 o'clock, and I'm starting to stumble over my words. So I'm going to thank you all for your patience with my articulation, and thank you very much for being part of today's webinar. Please let me know individually if you have questions or if you would like a copy of the presentation. And I look forward to working with everyone this year, and hopefully that can be a reality. Have a great afternoon.